Welcome to 3 Count Commentaries. So I should be doing a recap of SmackDown. I'll do that later. You got to talk about what's going on with Sasha Banks and Naomi because, again, people, all week, people have been throwing every single thing at the wall, contract stuff, creative stuff, just stuff everywhere. Ultimately, to me, this is incredibly immature. Now, in this video, I will have to go over some of this stuff because I don't expect everybody to be following this situation. So we're going to go through some of the ideas of what's going on here. PW Insider's been doing a decent job of keeping everything collected. So this is from the 17th, which I believe was the Tuesday. So it says, for those who have asked about the Raw walkouts, one version of the story has been floated by several PW Insider has spoken with is that the original concedes finish would feature women's tag team champions facing off during the main event of Raw in the six-pack challenge with Naomi beating Sasha Banks to end the match. PW Insider is told that the original plan for Raw would have seen Banks and Naomi featured in 2 or 3 segments, building up the idea that they would be facing off in the main event. After the bout, Raw would have gone off the air with the pair celebrating that Naomi was going to face Bianca Belair at the Hell in a Cell pay-per-view. The conceived storyline idea was that Naomi would then go on to Hell in a Cell and lose to Bianca Belair. There are some who believe that this week's SmackDown and angle would have been shot for Sasha Banks to wrestle and lose to Ronda Rousey, likely also at Hell in a Cell. So the women's tag team champions would have effectively been used to put over the Raw and SmackDown women's championship title holders in the weeks ahead. We are told that at some point during the day, likely after the initial concerns about creative were raised, there was an alternative idea that would have been Banks and Naomi have a short tag team match instead and be beat down after to set up a different program. One cited their opponents would have been Nikki Ash and Doudrop, but we have not 100% confirmed that to be the case. We are told that shortly before Raw, Banks and Naomi were informed by WWE producer Molly Holly that WWE was going with the six-pack challenge direction, with Naomi going over. Shortly thereafter, they informed John Laurinaitis that they were leaving the women's tag team championships belts behind. PWInsider.com is told Vince McMahon, sitting at the gorilla position, was told about the talents leaving just as or right after Raw went on the air. The Becky Lynch-Adam Pearce segment was pitched on the spot. One source credited Lynch with the idea, and McMahon ordered it to be shot and then placed into the show to start explaining the change to the by-now announced Raw main event. The belief among some is that creative issue was not Banks losing to Naomi, but how the duo had been portrayed over the next several weeks, especially after they had put so much time into building their team. Once Vince McMahon issued an edict that they would be teaming and winning the women's tag team championships at WrestleMania 38, and that after diving into building that team, they are going to wrestle each other and go out to pull off other talents, leaving them exactly where no one knows, which apparently was the crux of the issue. The WWE plan looks to have been that the women's tag team championship would have been downplayed until their next program after Hell in a Cell concluded. There are 2 trains of thought here. This is Mike Johnson editorializing now. Depending on which side of the fence you sit on, it says Sasha Banks and Naomi stood up against what they felt was bad creative that worked against them and everything they had built for themselves over the last several months. Therefore, they were fighting for themselves and what they felt was best in their fans. 2, Sasha Banks and Naomi were talents faced with were talents who were instructed to do the promotion that pays them, wanted them to do, fought against it, and when they didn't beat City Hall, instead opted out to walk out and not perform. Therefore, they let their company and their fans down. That's a black and white way of looking at things. The truth, however, is probably somewhere in the gray area in the middle. Now, he goes into sort of a lot of editorializing and basically asking questions after that. So the general idea is that Naomi was going to wrestle Bianca Belair. Sasha Banks was going to wrestle Ronda Rousey. Now, of all the things that we've heard over the last several days, with Serena Deeb talking about breast implants, with Toni Storm talking about she was going to have her shirt ripped off instead of the pie in the face, these 2 quit the company because they didn't want to lose singles matches on pay-per-view. I'm sorry, there is absolutely no way that I can sit back and justify and be okay with supporting people who were going to get singles title matches and lose. That means they were upset they were going to do singles title matches and lose. And let's not even take it to the next level. The next level of this is that Sasha Banks had already done this storyline. She did this with Bayley. Didn't she spend almost all of 2020 during the pandemic era as a tag team champion wrestling for singles titles? She wrestled Asuka 100 times for that belt, it seemed like. And she wrestled Io Shirai for the NXT title, because Bayley was already a singles champion. That was, the Bayley 2 belts, situation. And they were trying to do the 2 belt bank situation, right? This is literally almost the same thing that she was doing 2 years ago with the tag team championship. Here, see, there are times when the talent stands up for themselves and it's the right thing to do. This isn't one of those times. They were not being asked to do anything embarrassing. They weren't being asked to do anything that, somebody could feel, disappointed with or upset about or uncomfortable with. You're being asked to do your job. Do your job. Now, Vince McMahon has already set the standard. Bret Hart didn't want to do his job. Survivor Series 1997, we saw how that worked out. Ultimate Warrior 1996 didn't want to do his job. We saw how that worked out. Stone Cold Steve Austin didn't want to do his job. He got buried in the middle of the ring by Vince McMahon and The Rock. He was gone for 7 months. CM Punk didn't want to do his job. He walked out in 2014. He got fired 5 months later. He got fired. WWE does not fucking play around with this whole, I'm going to walk out and go home. I'm going to take my ball and go home. If they were guys, this situation would have been a lot worse. So everybody thinking, oh, it's racism. They're doing this because they're women. No. All of the men who have walked out have all been absolutely destroyed in the weeks beforehand, afterwards. With the exception of CM Punk, because I think they maybe thought he was coming back. Okay, and he was advertised for shows that he didn't show up to as well. This stuff is serious. And I don't want to hear it from people who have not run anything even close to a lemonade stand that it's just okay if you refuse to do your job. It doesn't matter if you're not going to do the job the way that you want to do it. You're being paid. He can't get upset and just stop paying you. So you don't just get upset and decide not to work. This is a reaction, action, reaction. You decided we're going to put the belts down and we're not going to come back. Okay, fine. So the suspension is light work. Why do they care? They didn't want to work anyway, right? So that's not even a punishment. They didn't want to work. They got what they wanted. They wanted the tag team championships to matter. Okay, well, now they're going to have a tournament. So some other women are going to get the belts and get the opportunity. They gave it up. Okay, fine. Other women are going to get those matches at the pay-per-view. So guess what? 2 spots opened up on the roster. A roster that was full of women who were being underutilized anyway. You had Shotzi, Aaliyah, Xia Li, haven't been on TV in weeks. Sasha Banks is on TV every fucking week. She's given all types of opportunities that other people didn't get. Doudrop and Nikki gets no opportunities. They get left behind all the time. Shayna Baszler and Natalya are barely utilized on TV. There's numerous women who are on the roster, excited to be there, who wanted to be there, and they said, hey, we don't want our spots. They would have been top spots too, and we don't want them. Because we don't want to wrestle in singles matches. We want to be in a tag team. Okay, fine. Fine. I mean, if you want to sit at home, sit at home. It is what it is. Why would anybody be upset that people who didn't want to work are now not working? You didn't want to. You wanted to go home. So they sent you home. Now, everybody gets what they want. You wanted the tag team championships to mean something and be portrayed and yada, yada, yada. Okay, now they're going to do it with somebody else. You can sit at home because that's what you wanted to do. Everybody is looking at this thing from a white knight's perspective. I'm not a white knight, man. I treat women exactly as I treat men. They have their own agency, their own brains. They make their own decisions. When you have what's her name? Cameron. She's coming out here talking about, well, Naomi wouldn't have done this. She must have been manipulated. Bullshit. Naomi is a grown woman. There is no manipulation. Maybe she did it in solidarity. I'll accept that. But no. We're not putting all the heat on Sasha. Sasha gets a lot of the heat because it's not the first time she's done some shit like this. From just after SmackDown ends, we see that they have also suspended sales of Naomi and Sasha Banks merchandise, which that's a little stiff, but it is what it is. It kind of goes with the platform of being suspended, is that we also going to suspend your merchandise, so they're going to basically starve them out and either make them play ball financially. Now, apparently both of them are in contract negotiations, and some people have said, well, it wasn't creative, it was contract. I'm not going to go back and forth with that. I don't care. Ultimately, the issue here is whether they re-sign or not re-sign. Does it really matter? Really, does it really matter? Naomi sat on the bench for a long time not doing anything. WWE just kind of had Naomi floating around. She was doing random jobs, not really doing much of anything. The moment she finally gets some momentum and gets something going for herself, she was going to wrestle for a singles title, which would have been unheard of last year. Could you imagine telling somebody in 2021 that Naomi was going to be wrestling for a singles title? They'd have been like, Naomi's not even on TV. Sasha Banks no-showed SummerSlam 2021, by the way. And she was supposed to wrestle Bianca Belair. Now, I have my own speculations and conspiracy theories. I do. And I'm going to share one of them. I think that Sasha Banks just don't want to work with Ronda Rousey. Now, when it was initially come out that, they were trying to avoid two of their opponents, it was kind of like they didn't want to wrestle Nikki and Doudrop. Of course, they had wrestled Nikki and Doudrop the previous week, so what was the problem there? We don't know. But I know for a fact, if you go through the Broken Skull sessions with Sasha Banks and look at how salty she gets at the concept of Ronda Rousey, I think she was avoiding wrestling Ronda Rousey. And maybe she just didn't want to. And that's, that's perfectly fine. That's just a conspiracy theory. It's just speculation on my part. It could be completely and totally wrong. Okay, I'll accept that. But I'm speculating like everybody else at this point. Because until we hear something from Naomi and Sasha Banks, we don't know what was going on. All right? So, they got suspended. Everybody got in their feelings. But you have to understand, the company does not play when it comes to no-showing. You don't get away with it. You don't get away with... You can say, again, I don't like the creative. Again, people hate the creative. I always hate the creative. Everybody hates the creative. But that doesn't give you cause to just take your ball and go home, as they say. That it doesn't work that way. You have to live in reality. In fairy tale make-believe land on Twitter, you can just basically quit your job and then it'll still be there and you can continue making money and everybody's just gonna bend to your will all the time. It's like, no. There is a hierarchy and a power dynamic in these situations. You are the person holding somebody else's intellectual property, meaning the tag team championships, the name, the look, everything. You are the person holding that company's intellectual property. Yes, part of it is you, part of it is them. They want to take their part and do this thing. You say, no, I want to take my part and do this thing. You sit down, you talk it out, you work it out as best you can. Because they can't just create another Sasha Banks. They can't put somebody else in the wig. It wouldn't work. It's not a traditional TV show in that way. They can't just put a new person in the glow gimmick. It doesn't work that way. Not in wrestling. In other forms of entertainment, yes, they could have killed you off like Aunt Viv from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and replaced you with somebody else. They can't do that in WWE. They tried it. It didn't work out. All right? But you are the person holding the Sasha Banks intellectual property. You have the Women's Tag Team Championships, which is WWE intellectual property. Part of it was the brainchild of Sasha Banks and Bayley. It's up to you to make this work. And if that means You gotta put over Ronda Rousey or Bianca Belair or whatever else to get what you want. Then you have to deal with it. You don't just say, well, it's been 2 months and we don't have any storyline, so I'm out. It's like, wait a minute. Okay. All right. Because guess what? WWE is going to claim what's theirs and you're going to claim what's yours. Once you claim what's yours, which is not Sasha Banks, which is not the tag team championships, you get to take whatever is yours and go home. That's it. That's all WWE did is we're taking our shit, which is the Sasha Banks merchandise, the Sasha Banks championships, all that stuff. That's our shit. We taking our shit back. You don't want to play ball? Fine. You take what you own, which is your body, face, everything. Get the fuck out of here. Bye. And that's what you want to do? Fine. Why would you be mad at that? They didn't take anything away from you. They're taking what's already theirs. They already own it legally. And that's the thing that people don't understand is WWE owns this shit. It's their shit. That's the thing about Bret Hart and I don't want to drop the belt in Canada. It's like, Bret, you don't understand, bro. That's Vince's fucking belt. You don't get to tell him what the fuck he's going to do with his belt. It's his fucking belt. You dropped the fucking belt. End of story. I get it. You don't like Shawn Michaels. I understand it. I understand wanting to negotiate. You want to try to do something else. I get that. But ultimately, it's Vince's belt. He makes the decision over what to do with his belt. If you decide it's my body, I'm not going to do that. Fine. We're going to have to do it our way. Meaning, we're going to take what's ours. You're going to take what's yours. And you're going to get the fuck out of here. End of story. And that's not going to come out well. This never works out the well and for the talent. It never does. People lose out on tons of money. Merchandise, ticket sales, there's a lot of stuff damaged. And then there's all these people on Twitter. All these people out here saying, well, I wasn't disappointed that Sasha Banks and Naomi quit. Well, yeah, I'm sure you wasn't. Because you're politically motivated to be okay with this shit, regardless of what it was. I'm saying, if they had a good reason, if Toni Storm would have quit because WWE said, we're going to rip your shirt off on TV, and she was like, hell no, you're not. I'm getting the fuck out of here. I would have been like, you know what? She should have not only quit, she should have sued them. But that ain't what happened. So I've been seeing that a lot about that too. She actually was like, you know what? I would rather not you rip my shirt off, but that's what we're going to do. Okay, let's go with that. And then they changed their mind and said, yeah, I'm going to hit you in the face with a pie instead. You know, like, never mind. Okay. All right. I'd rather prefer to get hit in the face with a pie than have my shirt ripped off. Okay, fine. But everybody's trying to tie all this crap together. It's like, no. Toni Storm, whatever her situation was, that was her situation. This is a completely different situation. This is, I don't want to lose at a pay-per-view. I don't want you to pay me to go out there, cut promos, have a match, what I do already anyway, and put somebody else over. They're quitting because they don't want to put over other people. That's the crux of this thing. That's the mid part of here. I guarantee you if they both were going to win, they wouldn't give a fuck. If you'd have told Naomi, oh yeah, you're going to go and beat Bianca Belair at the pay-per-view, she wouldn't have walked out. If you told Sasha Banks, oh yeah, you're going to go ahead and beat Ronda Rousey at Hell in a Cell, you think she would have walked out? No, they walked out because they were going to lose. Not because they were going to win, because they were going to lose. And so what if the tag team champions lose singles matches? So what? It's not the same thing. And I say, look, and this is just me trying to, being a problem solver, because that's kind of what I do. I deal with difficult people all the time. You try to meet them in the middle somewhere. I would have said, okay, look, you guys want to feel bad about this thing. How about we do this? How about we do a championship showcase match? Boston Glow versus Ronda Rousey and Bianca Belair. Main event of Raw, SmackDown, or whatever. Right? You guys, Naomi is going to pin Bianca Belair in a roll-up or something like that. And that's how she's going to get the title shot. Because Bianca Belair is going to say, hey, look, you pinned me. I'm not comfortable with that. Let's see if you can do it one-on-one. And then Ronda Rousey, during that match, can have her thing with Sasha Banks come out of that. And then you can separate and do your own thing. So you got your big women's title storyline. And then, of course, we could still be building up women's tag teams or whatever on the side. But you wouldn't have looked like shit. You would have gotten a clean win over Bianca and Ronda as a team. Then you would have wrestled them in singles matches and lost. Okay. Would everybody have been happy with that? Probably not. We don't know what was offered. All we know is what WWE has put out there. And that's not necessarily going to be 100% true. It's not. But it ain't going to be that far from the truth either. Now, this whole thing about contracts, I know it's 20 minutes into this video. You know, this whole thing about the contracts and negotiations and all this kind of stuff, that could be very difficult to deal with. Not because, you know, there's a competitor out there. I honestly don't think that, AEW is all that interested in Naomi. That's just me personally. If they were to sign Naomi, it would be to thumb WWE in the eye. Because, again, somebody like Ember Moon or somebody like Taya Valkyrie have been out there for a while now. They haven't signed them. And those women are far more known on the independents and far more the speed of AEW than Naomi. Okay? Now, they will do something like, oh, we're going to sign these girls. Well, Sasha Banks is different. That's why I'm talking about Naomi right now. So, Naomi's running a risk. Naomi has a personal risk of, basically screwing herself out of the business. Now, a lot of people, a lot of the crew, the Sasha Banks fan club, they tend to believe that Sasha Banks should just go off to Hollywood. And it's like, okay, sure. Until they hear that she's a complete and total brat. You think she's going to be able to pull this shit in Hollywood? Well, I'm not going to go. I'm not going to do what you asked me to do. I am going to leave. You think that shit's going to work in Hollywood? That attitude, it's not going to work. If you'd have said the same thing in 2002, people would have said the same thing to you about Steve Austin. Oh, well, Steve Austin's just going to go off and do movies. He can go do movies. The Rock can go do movies. He can go do movies. It's like, yeah, you might be able to get a part here and there, but, how does that really going to work out? It's a risk. It's a gamble. And look, I'm all for her taking the gamble. I'm not saying she's going to fail. I'm just saying people's personalities do not change that much. It's not like all of a sudden she's going to go to Hollywood and get humble. No. If she was to go to AEW, which Sasha Banks definitely could, he would have to definitely, Tony Khan would definitely have to break out the purse in order to get her to do it. But if she were to do it, she would have to probably have the same attitude there. The thing is, she's a diva. And it doesn't matter where you put these kinds of people. They just create more problems. It's the same thing when people talk about somebody like Austin Aries or somebody like Low Key. They have a reputation, and their reputation just simply follows them from one promotion to the next. Sure, they may have a good reason to complain or a good reason to get on somebody's nerves or, Austin Aries. I didn't even say he was wrong for his complaint about, the WrestleMania pay-per-view thing and, being left off the card and everything and not being able to get some of that DVD money. He wasn't even wrong. But the fact of the matter is he had a reputation of being an absolute shithead and people were like, you know what? We don't want to deal with this. Enough of this fucking guy. Enough. We gave him a chance. He fucked it up. Enough. It won't be long, man. Now, personally, here's what I think is going to happen. Do I think they will be fired? No. Do I think they'll let their contracts run out? No. I think they're going to give them some time. The suspension indefinitely. Right now, Sasha Banks has been she was gone for 5 months. When she left at WrestleMania 35. She was gone for 5 months. So that's going to be about the length of time I'm going to give it. I'm going to say that there's going to be a decision made probably within the next 90 days. That either they're not going to re-sign and they're both going to go away, in which case this sucks. because this is not the way you end your tenure, especially if you're Naomi and you've been there for a long time. Naomi's been there for a long time. You know, she's dealt with a lot of shit, no doubt. She's been there a long time. Is this really how she wants her WWE career to end? Sasha Banks, beloved. I'm even a fan of Sasha Banks. But is this really how you want it to end? Getting suspended indefinitely, basically throwing the belts on somebody's desk, and that's it. That's it. That's the end. Because we don't want to lose singles matches. Not because we were going to be embarrassed in some way. It just makes no sense. It just makes no sense. This is a terrible way to end your tenure. And the company will not be hurt that much at all. People tend to believe that WWE is going to be crippled by this. It's like Sasha Banks was in a tag team for a reason. There was no other role for her. They figured, okay, well, what else can we do? Charlotte's about to go away. So now they got no choice but to push other people. So if you're a Shotzi, and you were probably already in the doghouse, which from what I heard from sources, Shotzi was in the doghouse. You got an opportunity here. Now, either they're going to start calling some people up, which they might. They might actually start calling some girls up, to plug the holes. But you gave a prime real estate to somebody else. And maybe that's what you want. Maybe this whole, we want to make women's wrestling stronger and better and all that noble shit that they try to make it sound like, it's all noble and good. All right, fine. They're going to do that. Now the tag team championship tournament, there are no women's tag teams. We really don't need these belts, if we're being honest. We probably didn't need them in the first place. But since the women's tag team division was made up of mostly thrown together tag teams anyway, they're going to be fine. Because there's tons of women who are unappreciated, who aren't doing anything, haven't been given any opportunities, and now Sasha Banks and Naomi are going to give up their spot. So they're going to slam together something, probably with some NXT tag teams, and everything will probably work out fine. It'll work out one way or the other. My guess, and the smartest thing for me, is that they will put the belts on Toxic Attraction. That would mean calling them up from NXT, probably having Mandy Rose drop the women's title, and calling up Toxic Attraction as a trio, and then they are going to be the champions. Maybe that would be the smart thing to do, as a way of keeping some sort of continuity and moving forward. But we see that these people, and it was similar to Ember Moon, who complained, I got Shotzi taken away from me. I had my eyes set on being a tag team, and it's got taken away. It's like, yes, things change. You've been there for a while. You know that things change. Yes, it sucks for you to be told one thing and then for a business to go in a different direction because, hey, it's Monday. When I told you something on Saturday night, different than Monday comes around. All right, sure. We would love for everybody to stick to the plans. But we don't always stick to the plans around here, and you know that. So we're in a situation now where you either roll with the punches or you take what's yours and go home. And you have to ask the question, what is yours? Now, there's a lot of people, super fans, who think that this is going to be some huge loss. I say the machine goes forward. Vince fired bigger stars than Sasha Banks and Naomi. He has. The fact that they chose not to fire them, I think, is actually consistent with WWE and how they've treated this situation before. When people refuse to show up, they usually get suspended. And, they get fined or something like that. This is pretty consistent with that. They're not getting, the extra boot up the ass like Austin did. Austin got, 2 or 3 people standing in the middle of the ring ripping him apart. If they were guys, they would have definitely gotten a much different, treatment. Roman probably would have addressed it at the opening start of SmackDown. The fact that they waited till right before the main event to do this shows to me that, they didn't really want to. And a lot of people are like, oh, Vince is feeding them lines. They're like, yes, he's going to give them the company dialogue about what to say. What do you think? Michael Cole actually gives a shit about the women's tag team titles? He doesn't give a fuck. Why should he care? Of course he's going to have a sheet of paper right there reading it. You think he genuinely, in his heart of hearts, you think he's going to have the ability to suspend them? Well, I'm Michael Cole, announcer, and I'm very disappointed in them. It's like, well, I will be disappointed too. Look at all the shows they're going to miss if they're suspended indefinitely. That means people who are going to be buying tickets to a WWE live show expecting to see Sasha Banks will not see her. We don't care about what grown-ass dorks online think. There are children who are going to go to see Raw or SmackDown hoping to see Sasha Banks, and she's not going to be there. So yes, there are going to be people who are going to be disappointed because Sasha Banks chose to take what's hers and went home. End of story. If you want to be proud of her for it, go ahead. But you don't get to be upset that WWE is moving on. That's just childish. And I get that, that kind of childishness is usually, that brattiness is usually fed into online. But no, I'm an adult. I treat everybody like an adult. What were you asked to do that was so bad that you chose to not do it and go home? And you see this a lot in people, that the first time that they're asked to do something, they want to walk off. It's like, okay, well then you take the L. You chose this. If this is violence, you chose it because you're the one who put the belts on the desk. You're the one who left the building. You're the one who didn't show up to work. You did that. I'm not going to treat you like a child. You did that. So this is now the reaction. Like, share, and subscribe. I'll talk to you guys later, man. Peace.
Tell me what's worse than learning all that you led to believe was all horse crap. They distort so questions.